Sarah Williams wipes sweat from her forehead as she quickly moves between tables in the Riverside Diner restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. The hot July air seemed to become even more stuffy as the restaurant's air conditioner had been broken since morning. The squeaking sound of the ceiling fan mixed with the rustling sound of bills and the clash of knives and forks creates the familiar music of a busy day. Table 7 needs more coffee. The voice of Jerry, the head chef, rang out from the kitchen, mixed with the sizzling sound of grease on a hot pan. Sarah nodded, her neatly tied curly black hair swaying with each hurried step she took. It's been 5 years since Sarah started working at Riverside Diner. 5 years of long shifts, tired legs, and forced smiles with difficult customers. But for a 28-year-old single mother like her, this job is the only thing that helps her provide for her young daughter Madison and maintain a stable, even though not abundant, life. The clock on the wall read 9:45 p.m., only an hour left until closing time. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief, thinking of Madison at home with her grandmother. She is only 6 years old, but understands and sympathizes with her mother's busy work. The thought of her daughter's pure smile is the motivation that helps Sarah get through the most tiring days. The doorbell rang, signaling a new visitor had entered. Sarah turned around, ready with her familiar friendly smile, but that smile suddenly froze on her lips when she realized the guest had just entered. Under the warm yellow light of the restaurant, a tall man in a simple black suit was standing at the door. His shoulder-length black hair and thick beard could not hide the familiar face that Sarah had seen countless times on screen. Keanu Reeves. Sarah's heart beat faster, not because of the appearance of a Hollywood star, but because of what she had just witnessed through the window. Before entering the restaurant, she saw Keanu stop to give money to a homeless person sitting huddled outside. Not only that, he also took off his jacket and put it on the man's shoulders, despite the coldness of the Los Angeles night. "Hello, please come inside," Sarah regained her composure and said, trying to keep her tone as professional as possible. "Where do you want to sit?" Keanu smiled gently, his eyes exuding warmth and humility that Sarah had never seen in any guest. "A quiet corner would be nice, thank you." Sarah led him to a table in the corner of the restaurant, next to the window overlooking the gradually deserted street. The streetlight shines in, creating dim shadows on the old wooden table. She put down the menu and pulled out her familiar notebook. "Do you want any drink?" Sarah asked, trying not to let her voice shake. "A cup of black coffee, no sugar," Keanu replied, his voice deep. "And perhaps you can recommend me the best dish here?" Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Our hamburgers are made with fresh beef every day, and Jerry, our chef, has a special sauce recipe. It's the most popular dish here." "Then I'll try it," Keanu nodded. "And Miss Sarah?" He looked at the name tag on her uniform. "I see that man outside. Can you bring him a meal? I'll pay." Sarah felt a warm feeling spreading inside. This is not a movie star trying to create an image, but a sincere person showing kindness in the most natural way. "Okay," Sarah replied. "I'll prepare it right away." As Sarah returned to the kitchen, she couldn't help but think about her own situation. Previously, when she worked at another restaurant, she secretly brought leftover food to homeless people, and that got her fired. But now, witnessing Keanu's actions, she feels empowered and believes in good things. "Jerry," Sarah called as she entered the kitchen, "2 special hamburgers." "2 servings? It's almost closing time, but there are still so many customers?" Jerry frowned. Sarah smiled. "One for Keanu Reeves, and one for someone special." Jerry stopped and looked at Sarah with surprised eyes. "Keanu Reeves?" The guy from Matrix? That's right, Sarah nodded. And he just did something very beautiful. While waiting for the dish to be prepared, Sarah brewed a cup of black coffee. The familiar aroma emanates, blending with the warm atmosphere of the restaurant. She remembered the moment Keanu gave a coat to the homeless, and an idea suddenly flashed in her mind. Sarah took a large paper cup, filled it with hot coffee, and added a little sugar. She knew Los Angeles nights could be cold, and a cup of hot coffee would help warm the man out there. While bringing Keanu coffee, Sarah couldn't help but notice him staring out the window, watching the homeless man. There was something in his eyes, a sincere concern, not pity, that made Sarah admire him even more. "Here's your coffee." Sarah placed the cup on the table. "The food will be brought out in a few minutes." "Thank you," Keanu smiled. "You know, sometimes the smallest things mean the most. A hot cup of coffee, a warm meal, or simply a caring gesture." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Yes, I completely understand that. That's why I love this job, even though it's not always easy." "You seem like a very conscientious person," Keanu commented. "I can see that in the way you treat customers." Sarah felt her cheeks blush at the compliment. "Thank you. I'm just trying to do what I can." As Sarah returned to the kitchen to get her food, she couldn't help but think about their short conversation. There was something about the way Keanu spoke, the sincerity and depth, that made her feel respected and understood. Jerry has finished preparing 2 servings of hamburgers. The aroma of grilled meat and special sauce spreads throughout the space. Sarah carefully placed 1 serving in a takeout box and 1 serving on a ceramic plate. "Sarah," Jerry called as she was about to walk out. "What are you going to do with that hamburger?" Sarah stopped, a little nervous. I was going to give it to the man outside. Keanu paid for it." Jerry was silent for a moment, then suddenly smiled. "You know, I think we should add some French fries. On a cold night like this, a full hot meal would be better." Sarah was touched by Jerry's gesture. In the 5 years of working together, this was the first time she had seen him show such concern. When Sarah brought out the dish for Keanu, he was still sitting quietly by the window. The streetlight shined in, creating a light halo around his figure, like a quiet picture in the middle of the night. "Here's your dish." Sarah put down her plate. "I hope you'll like it." "Thank you," Keanu said, his eyes landing on the takeout box in Sarah's hand. "Are you going to bring it out to him?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, and a coffee too. I think he'll need it." "You are a kind person, Sarah," Keanu said, his voice deep. "Not everyone is willing to care for others like that." "I just do what I can," Sarah replied, feeling a little emotional. Sometimes, just one small action can change a person's entire day. Sarah stepped outside, the cold air of the Los Angeles night making her shiver. The homeless man was still sitting there, curled up in the jacket Keanu had given him. As Sarah approached, she could see his tired eyes looking up at her with some surprise. "Hello," Sarah said softly, bending down to be on his level. "I brought you some food and coffee." The man was silent for a moment, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "And thank you to that kind man, too." Sarah smiled, placing the food box and coffee cup down next to him. "Please stay warm. It's very cold tonight." When Sarah returned to the restaurant, she saw Keanu enjoying a hamburger with satisfaction. He looked up when he saw her and nodded appreciatively. "This is really delicious," he said. "You're right about the special sauce recipe." Sarah felt proud for Jerry. "I will pass on your compliments to our chef." At that moment, the restaurant door opened and a tall man walked in. Sarah recognized it as the restaurant's owner, Richard Thompson. He did not appear often at this hour, and his expression was not happy. "Sarah!" His voice sounded harsh. "Get into my office now!" Sarah's heart pounded loudly in her chest. She knew something was wrong. With an apologetic nod to Keanu, she followed Richard into the small office at the back of the restaurant. "What do you think you're doing?" Richard growled as soon as the door closed. "I just watched the security camera. Are you giving free food to the homeless?" "But sir, the customer paid for that meal," Sarah tried to explain. "I don't care," Richard interrupted. "This is a restaurant, not a charity place. You're ruining our image. Also, I know you often give leftovers to homeless people." Sarah felt the blood rush to her face. "That leftover food will be thrown away. At least it can help someone." "Enough!" Richard slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't the first time you've done this. I've warned you about this many times. You're fired." Sarah felt like there was a punch in the stomach. "You can't do that. I've worked here for 5 years. I have a little daughter to raise." "None of my business," Richard said coldly. "Pack your things and leave here now. I'll send you a check for your salary tomorrow." Sarah staggered out of the office, her head spinning. She couldn't believe it ended like this. 5 years of hard work, never being late, never taking a sick day. And now, because of one good deed, she lost everything. When she walked out, Sarah saw Keanu standing up, looking worried. It seemed he heard the argument. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Sarah felt tears begin to well up in her eyes. I just got fired," she whispered, her voice shaking. Keanu was silent for a moment, his eyes darkened. "For helping others?" Sarah nodded, unable to say anything more. She began to pack her things, trying to hold back the tears that were welling up in her eyes. "Sarah!" Keanu called as she was about to leave. "Wait." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "John, I need your help with something. There's a restaurant here." Sarah stood there, not understanding what was going on. She heard Keanu talking on the phone for a while. His voice was low and serious. "Sarah," he turned back to her after ending the call. "I have a friend who is looking for staff for his new restaurant in Beverly Hills. It's opening next week. Do you want a new job?" Sarah looked at Keanu, not believing her ears. Are you telling the truth?" "Totally true," Keanu smiled. "John is a good friend of mine. He needs people with your experience and dedication. And I think sometimes bad things that happen can lead to better things." Sarah felt like she was in a dream. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much." "Nothing," Keanu shook his head. "Here's John's phone number. Call him tomorrow morning." And Sarah. "Yes?" "Never stop doing good things," he said, his eyes sincere. "The world needs more people like you." Sarah left the Riverside Diner that night with a heavy heart, but also full of hope. When she walked out, the homeless man had fallen asleep, the empty food box next to him. Keanu's coat was still warmly wrapped around him. On the drive home, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Losing her job was scary, but somehow, she didn't feel any remorse for what she had done. Maybe Keanu is right. Sometimes bad things happening can lead to better things. When she got home, Sarah found Madison still awake, reading a book with her grandmother. The little girl jumped up and ran to hug her mother as soon as Sarah entered. "Mom!" Madison exclaimed. "I miss you, Mom." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, inhaling the pleasant scent of her hair. In that moment, she knew that everything would be okay. Maybe tomorrow will be difficult, but with her daughter's love and a new opportunity waiting, she will overcome it. "I missed you too," Sarah whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "I have a great story to tell you." Madison looked up at her mother with curious eyes. "What's going on, Mom?" "A story about kindness," Sarah smiled, "and about how magical things can happen when we do the right thing." That night, as Sarah tucked Madison into bed and told her about Keanu and the homeless man, she realized that this wasn't just a story about losing a job and finding a new one. This is a story about kindness, about the courage to do the right thing even when it isn't easy, and about how small acts can make big changes in the lives of others. 6 months later, the morning sunlight shines through the tall glass windows of the Heart and Soul restaurant in Beverly Hills, creating warm streaks of light on the polished wooden floor. Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her office, adjusting the black tie on her elegant business suit. Half a year has passed since that fateful night, and her life has changed in ways she never dreamed of. "Mom!" Madison's voice rang out from the corner of the room, where she was sitting and doing her homework. Since Sarah was promoted to a senior management position, she was able to arrange a small corner in the office for her daughter to study after school. "I just finished the math problem." Sarah smiled and walked up to her child. "You're so good. Let me see." At that moment, there was a knock on the door. John, the restaurant owner, walked in with his familiar friendly smile. "Sarah, are you ready for today's charity event?" John asked. "Yes, everything is ready," Sarah nodded. "We expect to serve about 200 people today." Heart and Soul's weekly charity program has grown far beyond what they expected. From serving only a few dozen people, they are now able to help hundreds of people in difficult circumstances every week. And what's even more special is how this program has inspired many other restaurants in the area. "Ah, one more thing," John said. "Keanu is stopping by at lunch today. He wants to see how the program works." Sarah's heart beat a little faster. Since that fateful night, she has only seen Keanu once again, at the restaurant opening. He had arrived as a normal guest, without an entourage or cameras, and had spent time chatting with each staff member. "Madison," Sarah turned to her daughter, "do you want to help me prepare for the charity event?" Madison's eyes lit up. "Can I help distribute food?" "Sure," Sarah smiled. "But first you have to finish your homework." When Madison got back to her homework, Sarah started going over everything. The kitchen is ready with a team of volunteer chefs, many of whom are famous chefs from luxury restaurants in the city. The dining area has been rearranged with long tables and comfortable chairs. And especially, they prepared take-home bags with dry food and necessities. Sarah couldn't help but think about the homeless man from that night. She tried to find him afterward, but he was no longer in the area. However, every time she saw people coming to the charity program, she thought about him and hoped that he had also found help somewhere. At exactly 11 a.m., the first guests began to arrive. Sarah stood at the door, greeting each person with a warm smile. There are familiar faces, those who have become regulars of the show, and there are new faces, those who are reaching out for help for the first time. "Hello, Aunt Mary," Sarah smiled at an older woman. "We have a special grilled ribs today." "Oh, Sarah," Mary held her hand. "You have no idea how much these meals mean to people like me. Not just the food, but the feeling of being respected and cared for." Sarah felt her eyes sting. This is exactly what she and John talked about when planning the program. It's not just about providing food, it's about creating a space where everyone feels welcome and respected. Madison has finished her homework, and is now helping hand out takeout bags, her little face lighting up every time she is told, "Thank you." Sarah looks at her daughter with pride. She is learning lessons about compassion and sharing that no textbook can teach. Near noon, a familiar motorbike parked in front of the restaurant. Keanu walked in, still in his familiar, simple outfit. He took the time to talk to each person, listening to their stories with sincere interest. "Sarah," Keanu called as he approached her. "It's amazing to see what you've accomplished here." "It's all thanks to the opportunity you gave me," Sarah replied. Keanu shook his head. "No, this is your work. You turned a simple idea into something much more meaningful." At that moment, an older man entered the restaurant. Sarah stood stunned. It was the man from that night. "You!" Sarah exclaimed. The man smiled. He looked different, clean and neat in simple but neat clothes. "I was hoping to see you again," he said. "I heard about this program and wanted to come, not to receive food, but to help." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Are you okay?" "More than okay," he nodded. "After that night, I went to a support center. They helped me find a job and a place to live. And now, I want to help others the way you helped me." Sarah turned to look at Keanu, who was standing there with a warm smile. "See?" he said softly. "Sometimes just a small act of kindness can make big changes." The afternoon passed in a warm atmosphere of shared stories and given meals. Madison had become friends with a girl the same age who had come with her mother, and the two children were now drawing together in a corner of the room. As the day came to a close, John called all the employees together to break the important news. "Thanks to the success of this program," he said, "we will open 2 more restaurants in Los Angeles, and Sarah will be the director of philanthropy for all 3. Sarah stood there, overwhelmed by this news. From a waitress who was fired for helping others, she has now become someone who can create greater change, helping more people. "Mom," Madison tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "I'm so proud of you, Mom." Sarah hugged her daughter, feeling her heart filled with love. "I'm proud of you too, honey. You've learned the most important lesson. Sometimes what seems like bad luck can lead to great things if we don't stop believing in the good." Keanu stood up, preparing to leave. "Sarah," he said, "do you know why I chose to help you that night?" Sarah shook her head. "Because I saw in you what this world so desperately needs, unconditional kindness. And now, you have spread that to many others." When Keanu left, Sarah stood by the restaurant window, looking out at the bustling Beverly Hills street. She thought about her journey, from a small restaurant in the city center to here, from the fear of losing her job to her belief in good things. 1 year later. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen." Sarah stood in front of the microphone, looking down at the crowd in the luxurious conference room of the Four Seasons Hotel. "Today, I am honored to share the journey of Heart and Soul and our Meals with Love program." In the crowd, she recognized familiar faces. John was sitting in the front row with a proud smile. Madison, in her most beautiful dress, was sitting next to her grandmother, and especially Keanu Reeves was sitting modestly in the front row. A corner of the room, still in her familiar, simple outfit. "A year ago," Sarah continued, her voice deep and firm, "I was a simple waitress, a single mother trying to raise my young daughter. One night, an act of suicide occurred, actually changed my life forever." She tells her story about that fateful night, about being fired, and about the unexpected opportunity she received. But more importantly, she talked about what happened next. Meals with Love is now available in 10 restaurants in Los Angeles, she says with pride. We serve more than 2,000 free meals each week. But most importantly, we have created a community, a place where everyone is welcomed, respected, and given the opportunity to change. Change your life. Sarah looked down at her notes, but then decided to close them. What she is about to say comes from the heart. Last night, while preparing for this speech, my daughter asked a great question. She asked, "Mom, why do people have to pay to come hear about giving?" And that got me thinking. Today's conference ticket money will be used to expand our program to other cities. But really, we're not just here to talk about giving go, but also about believing. Sarah paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the crowd. Believe that an act of kindness, no matter how small, can make a difference. Believe that within everyone there is the ability to overcome adversity and help others. And most importantly, believe that when we give without expecting anything in return, we truly receive the greatest gifts. From the corner of his room, Keanu nodded slightly. Sarah smiled and continued, "I want to share with you a new story. Last week, a woman came to our restaurant. She was not to receive free food, but to apply for a job. She said 3 months before, she was one of the people we helped. Now, after settling down, she wants to come back to help others. That's what we call the ripple effect waves of kindness. When a person is helped, they want to help others, and the circle continues to expand." Sarah looked toward Madison, who was sitting up straight, her eyes shining with pride. "My daughter is now 8 years old. Every week she gets up early on Sundays to go to the restaurant with me, help distribute food and chat with other children. She is learning a lesson that no school can teach, that a person's true worth lies not in what they have, but in what they give." From the front row, John stood up and started clapping. Gradually, the whole conference room rang with applause, but Sarah raised her hand to signal everyone to be quiet. "I'm not finished yet," she said with a smile, "because today I have a special announcement. With the support of the Keanu Reeves Foundation and many other philanthropists, we will open the first Heart and Soul Opportunity Center, a place that not only providing meals, but also job training programs, job counseling, and temporary housing assistance. Because we believe everyone deserves a second chance, like I did given." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes as she saw many people in the audience wiping away their tears. And here's the most important thing I want to share with you today. Never underestimate the power of an act of kindness. You never know what kind of ripples it will create. Years ago, I thought I had lost everything when I was fired for helping a homeless person. But today, I stand here, realizing that sometimes things that seem like the end are just that, is the beginning of something greater. When Sarah finished her speech, the entire conference room stood up and applauded. Madison ran onto the stage and hugged her mother. John and Keanu moved forward together, and in that moment, Sarah felt complete. Not only because of the successes she had achieved, but also because of the lives she had touched. After the conference, when everyone had left, Sarah stood alone on the stage, looking out at the empty auditorium. She remembered the moment a year ago when she stood in her waitress uniform, worrying about how to make ends meet. Now, looking back on the past, she understands that life does not always give us what we want, but it always gives us what we need to grow. Madison returned to the stage, holding a piece of paper. "Mom, I drew this for you." Sarah picked up the paper. It was a picture of her in a suit standing in front of a restaurant, surrounded by smiling people. Above the picture, Madison wrote in scribbled handwriting, "My mother, the one who turns bad things into good things." Sarah hugged her daughter, feeling her heart filled with love. Yes, that is the biggest lesson she has learned throughout this journey, that in life, nothing is truly bad or good, only how we choose to react to it. And sometimes, the seemingly darkest moments can lead us to the most wonderful things, if we have the courage to believe and continue to do the right thing. "Dear," Sarah whispered, stroking her daughter's hair, "I hope you will always remember. In life, what matters is not what happens to us, but how we choose to face it, with it. And sometimes, just one small act of kindness can change a person's whole world." Madison nodded, her eyes shining with understanding beyond her years. "I know, Mom. Just like Uncle Keanu helped you, and now you're helping many others. I want to be like you, too." Sarah smiled, realizing that perhaps this was her greatest success. Not the restaurants, charity programs, or speeches, but being able to inspire her daughter about the value of kindness and resilience. When they left the conference room, the Los Angeles sunset was casting a yellow-orange hue over the city. Sarah knows that tomorrow she will start a new day with new challenges. But now, she faces them not with fear, but with faith. Faith that in every challenge lies an opportunity, and in every dark moment, the potential for a new beginning. It's just brighter. "Jewel." "I know you wouldn't," John replied. "And hey, Sarah?" "Yes, we have a special program at the restaurant. Every week, we spend one day serving free meals to people in difficult circumstances. I think you would be very suitable to run this program." Sarah felt her heart overflow with joy. It's like Keanu said, sometimes bad things happen that can lead to much better things. And sometimes, just a small act of kindness can create ripples of change that spread farther and wider than we can imagine. A week later, when Sarah walked into her new restaurant in her manager's uniform, she felt like she had found not only a new job, but also a new purpose. And every time she sees the smiles on the faces of those served during the restaurant's special program, she remembers that fateful night. The night when an act of kindness changed her life forever. Forever.